Many people like us, who are learning English, like to use TED Talks, but we have trouble reading TED Talk scripts due to difficult words and sentences we don't understand. It can end up causing us to lose our motivation. So, I have simplified the English in the TED Talk. I broke it down into easier sentences to help you understand better. When you start with these easier sentences, you can get a basic idea of what the talk is about. And if you come across something you don't understand, it sparks your curiosity to learn more. And when you watch the TED Talk, after following these simpler sentences, it'll be much easier to understand the original one. Reading practice. For speaking. Read silently or aloud, as if you were telling it to someone else. Audio will be without repetition, with a brief pause between each chunk or sentence.
What makes a good life? Lessons from the longest study on happiness. What is important for our health and happiness in life? If you want to invest in your future, where should you spend your time and energy? A recent survey of young people found that over 80% of them said their main goal in life was to become rich. And 50% of these young people said another major goal was to become famous. People often tell us to work hard, try our best, and do more. They make it seem like these are the things we should chase for a good life. Seeing the whole story of people's lives. The choices they make. And how those choices turn out is very hard. Most of what we know about life comes from asking people to remember the past. But looking back, things aren't always clear. We forget a lot about what happens to us. And sometimes our memory is not exactly accurate. We are often told to work harder, to strive for more. We are led to believe that these are the things we need to pursue for a good life. It's very difficult to get a complete picture of someone's life. The choices they make, and the outcomes of those choices. Most of what we understand about human life comes from asking people to recall the past. But as we know, looking back is not always accurate. We forget a lot of what happens in our lives. And sometimes our memories can be quite creative. But what if we could see people's entire lives? From when they were teenagers to old age? What if we could study them? To find out what truly makes people happy and healthy? But what if we could see people's entire lives? As they happen over time? Imagine if we could research individuals from their teenage years to when they're old. Understanding what truly brings happiness and health. We did that. We conducted a study. That might be the longest study on adult life ever done. For 75 years, we followed the lives of 724 men. Year after year, asking about their work, home lives, and health. Throughout the study, we did not know how their life stories were going to turn out. Studies like this are really rare. Most projects of this kind don't last more than 10 years. Because people leave the study. The money for research runs out. Or the researchers get busy or pass away. And no one continues the work. But luckily, and because many researchers kept trying, this study has continued. Around 60 of the first 724 men are still alive. Participating, most of them in their 90s. Now, we're starting to study. The more than 2,000 children of these men. And I'm the fourth person in charge of the study. Studies like this are very rare. Most projects like this fail within 10 years. Because too many people leave the study. The research funding runs out. The researchers get distracted, or they die. And no one continues the work. But this study has survived. Due to a combination of luck. And the persistence of several generations of researchers. About 60 of the original 724 men are still alive and participating in the study. Most of them in their 90s. We are now starting to study. The over 2,000 children of these men. I am the fourth director of this study. We've been watching two groups of men since the year 1938. The first group joined the study. When they were in their second year at Harvard College. They all finished college during World War II. And then most of them went to serve in the war. The second group we followed was a bunch of boys from the poorest parts of Boston. We picked them for the study. Because they came from some of the most difficult and disadvantaged families. In Boston in the 1930s. Most of them lived in small, crowded apartments. And many didn't have hot and cold running water at home. When these teenagers joined the study, we interviewed all of them. They got checkups from the doctor. We visited their homes and talked to their parents. Then, as they grew up, they became all sorts of things. Some worked in factories, some became lawyers. Others were builders, and some even became doctors. One even became the President of the United States. Some had problems with alcoholism. And a few of them developed a mental illness. Called schizophrenia. Some moved up in society from the bottom to the very top. While others went the other way. The people who started this study would never have thought that I would be here today, 75 years later. Telling you that the study is still going on. Every 2 years. Our caring and hardworking research team calls our men and asks if we can send them more questions about their lives. Many of the men in Boston's inner city ask, why do you keep wanting to study me? My life isn't that interesting. The Harvard men never ask that question. To understand their lives better, we don't just give them surveys. We talk to them in their homes. Get their health records, take their blood. Scan their brains, and talk to their kids. We videotape them talking with their wives. About their deepest concerns. And when, about 10 years ago, we finally asked the wives if they would join us in the study, many of the women said, finally, the time has come. I was beginning to think you'd never ask. So what have we learned? What do we learn from the many pages of information? We've collected about these lives. Well, it's not about being rich or famous. Or working more and more. The main message from this 75-year study is simple. Having good relationships makes us happier and healthier. That's it. We've learned 3 big lessons about relationships. First, being socially connected is good for us. And being lonely is harmful. People who have strong connections with family, friends, and community are happier, healthier, and live longer than those who don't. Being lonely is like a poison. People who feel more isolated than they want to be are less happy. Their health gets worse earlier in life. Their brain function declines sooner. And they don't live as long as people who aren't lonely. Sadly, at any time, more than 1 in 5 Americans say they feel lonely. We also know that feeling alone can happen. Even when you're surrounded by many people. And it can happen in a marriage too. So, the second lesson is that it's not about how many friends you have. Or if you're in a relationship. What really matters is the quality of your close relationships. Living with conflict is bad for our health. For example, marriages with lots of conflict and not much love can be really harmful. Maybe even worse than getting a divorce. On the other hand, being surrounded by good warm relationships is protective. After following our men until they were in their 80s, we wanted to look back at them. When they were in their midlife. We wanted to see if we could figure out who would become a happy and healthy person in their 80s and who wouldn't. When we gathered all the information, we knew about them at age 50. It wasn't their cholesterol levels in middle age. That told us how they would grow old. It was how satisfied they were in their relationships. The people who were the most satisfied in their relationships at age 50 were the healthiest at age 80. Good close relationships seem to protect us from some of the problems of getting old. The men and women who were happiest in their relationships said that even on days when they had more physical pain, They were still happy. But the people who were in unhappy relationships felt more emotional pain on days when they had more physical pain. Our most happily partnered men and women when they were in their 80s said that on the days when they had more physical pain, their mood stayed just as happy. But for those in unhappy relationships, on days with more physical pain, it was intensified by more emotional pain. And the third important lesson we discovered about relationships and our health is that good relationships not only protect our bodies, but also protect our brains. It seems that being in a strong relationship with someone else when you're in your 80s is good for you. People who feel they can rely on their partner when they need help have better memory for longer. But people who feel they can't rely on their partner start to lose their memory earlier. Good relationships don't have to be perfect all the time. Being in a securely attached relationship with someone in your 80s is like having a shield. People in relationships where they can truly rely on the other person have better memories. These people's memories stay sharp for a longer time. On the other hand, people in relationships. Where they feel they really can't count on the other one. Experience memory decline earlier. These good relationships don't have to be trouble-free all the time. Some of our older couples could argue with each other every day. But as long as they felt they could truly rely on the other. When things got tough. Those arguments didn't affect their memories. So, this message. That having good close relationships is good for our health and well-being. This is wisdom that's been known for a very long time. Why is it hard for people to understand and easy to ignore? Well, it's because we're human. What we really want is a quick solution. Something we can get. That will make our lives good and keep them that way. Relationships are messy and complicated. And the hard work of taking care of family and friends. Isn't glamorous or exciting. It's also something you do for your whole life. It never stops. The happiest people in our 75-year study were those who worked hard to make new friends. After they retired. Like the young people in a recent survey, many of our men thought that being famous, rich, and successful was what they needed for a good life. The people in our 75-year study who were the happiest in retirement were the ones who actively worked to replace workmates with new playmates. Just like the millennials in that recent survey, many of our men, when they were starting out as young adults, really believed that fame, wealth, and high achievement were what they needed to pursue for a good life. But again and again, over these 75 years, our study has shown that the people who did the best were the ones who focused on relationships, with family, friends, and community. So what if you're 25, or 40, or 60 years old? What could focusing on relationships look like? There are many possibilities. It could be something simple, like spending less time on screens and more time with people. Or, you could try to make a boring relationship more exciting. By doing something new together. Like going for long walks or having date nights. Or, you could talk to a family member who you haven't talked to in a long time. This is because family fights that happen a lot can hurt the people who stay angry. So, what about you? Let's say you're 25, or you're 40, or you're 60. What might getting closer to relationships look like? Well, the possibilities are almost endless. It might be something as easy as spending more time with people. Instead of looking at screens. Or making a boring relationship more interesting. By doing something new together. Like taking long walks or having special nights out. You could also reconnect with a family member. You haven't talked to in years. Because those common family fights can really hurt the people who are holding on to grudges. I want to end with a quote from Mark Twain. More than 100 years ago, he looked back on his life and wrote this. There isn't time. Life is so short. For arguing, saying sorry, feeling upset, or blaming others. There is only time for love. And it's just a very short moment, so to speak, for that. The good life comes from having good relationships. Thank you.